Hello everybody, welcome to this webinar of EcoReFibre. If you are curious, you should know a little bit about EcoReFibre, and the aim of this project is to develop and demonstrate innovative demos for environmental sound and commercially valuable recycling of end-of-life fiberboards. EcoReFibre has been around for some time, and we still have some time to conclude activities, and we are at a very important phase in the project, coming to the end next year. We have already demonstrated a range of recycling technologies. Some of them are very promising for the industry, I must say. And now we are in the phase that secondary materials obtained will be demonstrated at operational environment or relevant industrial environment, TRL6 or TRL7, for conversion into valuable end products. Basically back to fiberboard, with aim to substitute 25% of virgin fibers, but other products as well, insulation boards, particle boards, and other biocomposites. Of course, the hypothesis is that the quantities of fiberboard waste are growing exponentially. But this is in theory, and Mark, with his Mark ideas, had to prove that, and he created some nice models, and we are all want to hear about that, and they're available on EcoReFibre website. Mark is the soul of EcoReFibre, I must say, with many contributions, not only in this work, but in many other aspects. So I give you the word, Mark.
Okay, Stergios, thank you very much indeed, and welcome to everyone to this webinar, where we will demonstrate a deliverable of the project, which is a model that predicts fiberboard waste volumes in a range of different regions. And you can play with this model now. It's already available on the EcoReFibre website, where hopefully you see the EcoReFibre website at the moment. And you just need to click on the orange button that says Discover our MDF Waste Generation Model, which I'm going to do now, and then you will see it. Now, the idea of this model is that we have plenty of data on the production of a wide range of fiberboards, but the fiberboard sector is dominated in volume terms by MDF and HDF production. So we've largely focused on those numbers. And what we know for certain is that there's been a huge growth in MDF and HDF production since the 1990s. In the early 1990s, it was a real new kid on the block. And for some of you, that may seem like a long time ago, but some of us older ones, it seems like yesterday. And up until 2021, it had become the second most produced panel in the world. Now, all of that production, which is around about just a little bit less than 110 million cubic meters a year around the world. So all of that material eventually will become waste. So some of the waste that we see today, some of it may have come from the 1990s, some may have come from 2002, some may have come from 2013, and some may have actually come from this year. And so what this model is doing is trying to get a justifiable proportion of how much waste from any 1 year of production will actually be waste in this year that we're currently living in. And that's the basis of how this model works. So let me try to demonstrate it, and then hopefully the approach will become more clear. So when you see the model, you've got two main windows. One is the consumption of MDF. And below it, you've got what the model predicts in terms of waste following that consumption. Now, when you first open this model, it defaults to the actual data that's known. And at the moment, you can see here, we're set on the world. So this is global production data. And so this is global waste production. And so the data that we're using is only up until 2023. Hopefully, towards the end of this year, we'll have the 2024 data that we can add to this model. So because the data that we're giving the model says there is no production after 2023, you can see why we've got this gradual decline. So clearly that's nonsense. There will be some production next year and in the years ahead and so on. So the approach we've taken to that is selecting a forecast type, and you have three options. Actual data is what you see there. Conservative is, well, I should select it. And basically it is based, you can go to a little bit of help here. And the conservative is a modest 2% increase in MDF consumption over a 30-year period. So basically stable. So if we assume there is no real additional growth other than what we have now, then in that situation, what you have below is the waste generation in that situation. Now you can see the numbers jump up and down a little bit. This was an innovation from my colleague Latino, who's in the audience, that we added a little bit of random numbers, a little bit to this future production to make the data look a bit more realistic. Because otherwise it would be just a flat linear line, and we just thought this looked a little bit better. So based on a conservative situation, so there's no real growth in global production across the world, with the default settings of the model, what the model is predicting now, so we are 2025, if I go here, it's predicting that in this year we should produce a little bit more than 79 million cubic meters of fiberboard waste across the world. That's a lot of material. And the way the model highlights data, you can see the highest consumption in our highest consumption is 2049 because of our random number feature, and the highest waste production will be in 2053. So that gives you your first basic scenario. You can, in fact, download the data, either the consumption or the MDF waste, by clicking the CSV button, which will take you to another web page where you'll get the opportunity to download an Excel spreadsheet with these numbers that are listed here. So you can create a scenario and download the data and use it as you wish. So if I am feeling very optimistic, so there's much more growth in MDF production, and I guess many people in the audience are hoping that this is much more what's going to happen, then we would see even more growth in waste production. So what in 2025, it doesn't change very much actually, 2025, because we've got that growth in the future. We've got a little bit less than 80 million cubic meters. So only 400,000 cubic meters more, because that future production has not yet become waste. Okay, now the next thing you can change, I'm going to leave the forecast type as optimistic. But the next thing you can change is the lifespan of typical MDF products. And we did a lot of work on this to try and determine what is the typical lifespan of products that contain MDF. Because, for example, a packaging material, that will have a lifespan pretty much of 1 year, whereas a door or maybe a bit of skirting that's in an interior fitting of in a wall, maybe they will have a lifespan of 40 or 50 years. So in collaboration with the European Panels Federation, who are a partner in the project, they gave us access to their data that their members supply in terms of where do their products go? So who are the end users of MDF? So we were able to calculate a weighted average across the different product types. And in order to get an idea of how long a product lasts in a product type, such as a door, we had an online survey where we had about 300 responses of a wide range of people from across Europe. And we took the median value of those based on the principles of what's known as the wisdom of the crowd approach. And we've used those numbers in collaboration or combination with the data from European Panels Federation to come up with an average lifespan. And that is, our recommended value is 12 years. So, but we give the option of people to change that lifespan because things will change. At the moment, there's a general recognition that it's better for the environment if we make things last longer, or we use them for longer before replacing them. Now, if that becomes the norm across Europe, then maybe the typical lifespan of MDF products will be longer. So you can actually adjust it. I can adjust it. At the moment, you can only adjust it up to 15 at the moment. And it's you don't really see the impact when you change it one at a time. But if I go to an extreme, if I go the other way, if I go to say that it's only 6 years, you see, I don't know if you did see, I saw it, but the numbers go up very much at the beginning. So if I go to 2025 again, it's now saying around the world we would have more than 95 million cubic meters. If you remember, before it was less than 80 million cubic meters. So you can, just with the global data, you can change the forecast type, you can change the lifespan, and you can play around with those different numbers. And we're reasonably confident in these numbers because every cubic meter of MDF that's made on the planet at the moment remains on the planet. So that cubic meter will become waste somewhere on the earth at some point in the future. What becomes a little bit more complicated and why we needed this project was what happens in a sub-region of the world like Europe. So I'm going to select EU 27. And the same approach is used. We've got the production data from the FAO STAT website, cross-checked with EPF. We have the lifespan of the products. And at the moment, you can see I've got a conservative prediction for the future. So across Europe, with the standard, if you like, default settings, in 2025, we would expect a little bit less than 9 million cubic meters of waste MDF and fiberboard to be distributed across Europe. I forgot what I was going to say next. Yes. Now, the problem with the region is there's a range of products that are imported and some products that are exported. And we tried very hard during the first 3 years of the project to try and get some numbers that were reliable for this import-export. Now, we can get numbers in terms of value and in terms of weight. So we know, I don't know, we could probably extract from the customs and excise data the weight of all furniture imported into a region in 2024, and its value was X million euros. But what proportion of that weight was MDF? That's what we couldn't justify. So in the end, we decided that because we couldn't give a number that we felt confident with, that the best way forward was to give the user the option to decide how much additional fiberboard might arrive on the European market, and that will eventually become waste. So it may arrive in the form of obvious products that may contain MDF, like flooring, and less obvious products like toys or shoes. So what the end user can do, or the user of the model can do, is they can decide as a percentage how much additional fiberboard arrives on the market for that given region. And then the model below will predict the values. This part of the tool is particularly important when you go to a smaller region, such as a country. But before I get to that, if we look at the data at the beginning now, for those of you who will remember 2008, 2009, the financial crisis, we had this big drop, which was less obvious in the world data, but it was there. And each time you go into a smaller and smaller region, these numbers tend to become more and more volatile. And we can see in the data that there is also an impact in terms of waste generation. And that's because within the first year of production, there's a certain proportion of material that immediately becomes waste. So MDF tends to be made in big panels. It's sold to, let's say, a furniture manufacturer who's going to cut it up into smaller pieces. So you've got the dust, you've got offcuts, you've got shaping formats, shaping material. You've got transport losses. I wish there weren't any, but unfortunately, during transport, panels become damaged and so on. And you've got storage losses. Panels are not always stored as they should be, and so they cannot be used. So in the very first year, there's a certain proportion which immediately becomes waste. And so we see that impact in this part of the model here. Okay, so let me go to a smaller region. We've got France, because that's where I'm living, and that was our model country at the beginning. And okay, maybe if I stay with France for a model, again, you can see the numbers are much more volatile. And I can go here and I can see that for France, with the current settings, we should have a little bit less than 1 million cubic meters of waste, which is quite interesting, because if I come up to 2025, the actual production is only just over 1 million. So if you could collect all of that material together and recycle it in such a way, in theory, that if you could really do it in a very efficient way, I don't know, 80% of the material could come from recycled material. In terms of volumes, there's enough material there. But the question is, how do you sort it? Or how do you collect it? How do you sort it? How do you extract the fibers and so on? So that's another part of EcoReFibre, which we won't go into today. So if I go to there's Germany as well, which is a big country, a very important part of the market. But as another example, we've got Sweden. That's where our coordinator of this project lives. So we thought it would be nice to have them. But this is a country where there is not production. So we're relying very much on imports and exports of material to predict the consumption. And for Sweden, it's much smaller. There's a fewer people. So we've got 250,000 cubic meters of consumption for this year, and 180,000 in waste because of all the previous years of imports of fiberboard products. If I now reduce the lifespan somewhat, actually, that was actually assuming there was an extra 20% of imports through products that are not termed as MDF, so toys, shoes, and so on. If I make that to 0 again, so we know it's actual data, 2025 is 200,000 cubic meters, and waste is 180,000. Yeah. Sorry, that's with a 6-year lifespan. I'm going. My hand is going faster than my brain. But you can see here how the model reflects really the changes in the market when you have a very short lifespan. And as I explained earlier, we're reasonably confident that the typical average lifespan is 12 years. And the way this works is, I have to admit, this part of our help is not particularly useful, and we are preparing a guide to give you a little bit more background information on how the model works and how to use the model. But the help at the moment demonstrates how the lifespan works in terms of calculating how much waste of a given production year becomes waste in another given year. So basically, if you want an average lifespan of 15 years, your curve is like this. So it becomes quite linear. Whereas if you have a lifespan of 6 years, there's a lot more waste, a lot more is converted into waste in the early years. And the only thing we've assumed in this model is that after 45 years, 99% of production of a given year will become waste. That was just an arbitrary choice on our part, after discussion, of course, that we believed that the vast majority of an MDF produced 45 years ago. So what were we in 1980? There was very little production at that time, but 99% of that material will now have become waste. Probably the 1% is in museum pieces around the world. But in the new guide, we will explain this in a little bit more clearly to you. Okay, so basically, that is how the model works. You have got the choice of these different regions. We may add other countries, but it's a question of time. We've got these 4 different scenarios in terms of consumption, the actual data, which I'm not so sure is so useful in terms of what's happening in the future, because the predictions are clearly wrong, but it could be useful in terms of what's happened in the past. Then you've got the conservative, optimistic, and pessimistic scenarios. You can also adjust how much material comes in and into the market as a form of imported products. And the model just does its thing and generates the numbers here, which you can download and use as you wish. So basically, that's the model. If I've forgotten anything Latino, then say so. But now I'm open to questions. Latino.
I don't know what else to say. The demonstration was perfect, Mark. So thanks, Mark, for the presentation, for the demonstration. And if there are any technical questions about the transition from the model that you build to the visualization, the tool I used, etc., I'll try to answer. Mm-hmm. So if there are some questions, we are open.
Now we're open to questions now from anybody. You can either speak or put them in a chat.
Can I ask a question, Mark?
Sure, George.
Sorry, I'm switching on the camera as I finish my lunch, so
I hope you ate well.
Yes, that was very nice. Thank you. I didn't have wine though, so I'm sober, which is important. I can ask the right questions, I suppose. Did you guys, because this is almost like a top-down approach to build a model, looking at the, let's say, production and demand numbers, and then come up with an estimated theoretical sort of waste volume. Did you verify those numbers with some of the countries that, you know, we have done, let's say, bottom-up type of work in the UK, or, you know, how these numbers match with some of the studies that have been done in various jurisdictions?
Yeah, well, as I said, yeah, thank you, George. That's a very important question. So as I said, during the project, we focused on France, and we've been collecting a very large quantity of samples of recovered wood, post-consumer wood waste, and we've been picking that by hand to determine how much fiberboard is present.
Right.
We're a little bit surprised that the numbers are indicating rather less fiberboard than we were expecting, so about a little bit less than 5%. And I think that's partially because in France there's starting to be a lot more upstream sorting. However, if we take a purely furniture recycled material, then you're up to about just over 9% of fiberboard. Now, what we've done is I presented actually our last project meeting that this model for France predicts slightly higher proportions of fiberboard than we're actually observing. But so I think it's predicting about 6%, and we're actually seeing just over 4%. So I think we're in the right ballpark. But our intention was we never imagined to be absolutely precise, because I can adjust it a little bit by changing the lifespan. So I think if I remember, if I went to 6 year lifespan, I got quite close to the 6%.
Do you have UK in that model?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
Because that'll be nice. That's a quite well documented, as you know, market, and it would be nice to see how close.
What we're also doing is there's a Japanese researcher called Shigeru Kyo, who presented at the conference, the EPF conference last October. And the Japanese market's quite different. Fiberboard is used a lot more in construction, so it has a much longer lifespan.
Yes.
And she's taken the classical mathematical approach of calculating half-life of products. And we are in the process of comparing our data set. So I'm not showing it, I haven't included it here, but I have done it for Japan. And so I want to see what my model gives relative to what her model gives. And so that's still ongoing.
Okay.
But I don't imagine that we are super precise other than by chance. The idea here is to give people, when you're thinking of investment, for example, do I buy one of these sorting machines to sort out fiberboard? You want a kind of sensitivity analysis. What's the worst case situation and the best case situation? And I think this model gives you that range. Where in that range we are exactly, it's hard to say.
I'd say, yeah, of course.
And that's how I see this as being useful. Or if you are a policy maker and you think, okay, looking at this model, we can see that a worst case scenario in terms of volumes from their perspective, we've got 10 million cubic meters of MDF. We need waste MDF. We need to do something about it. So from that's the way I see the model being used. Other than that, I don't imagine someone saying, okay, in Belgium, in 2026, we're going to have this quantity of fiberboard waste. Being very precise. That's not what the model is intended to do.
I say this because in various projects that I've been involved in the last few years, the thing that comes apparent is that the quantity of the MDF waste within the wood waste volumes is very low, and it is within that percentage that you mentioned, between 4 to 6 or even 9% in some extreme cases, and that is quite low to help justify separation, And then if you move away from big cities and you're in smaller jurisdictions, that makes it even more difficult to justify investments, So the question is, okay, do we estimate correctly the volume of MDF that appears to be in the wood waste volumes? And is there any other MDF that doesn't actually enter those streams, you know, or it should be entering and it doesn't enter? Because for me, it looks quite low, to be honest. You know, it's a very low percentage, which makes it very difficult for companies that are not located in big cities, big centers, to incorporate recycling technology.
Yeah, but in each case, if I take a region, it's a bit easier. The model starts to approach the values that we're actually seeing of production. You see that we've got 36 million compared to 9 million. So, but it's mathematical. It's going to happen like this, and so the consumption is really going to determine what percentage is present.
Exactly.
So just from that perspective, you can do a back of the envelope calculation of, okay, this country's got X 100,000 or X million cubic meters. According to theirs, all countries have done some kind of survey on how much waste wood is present. One divided by the other, that gives you the percentage.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you, George.
Well, thank you.
Are there other questions?
If I may, Mark.
Of course, Sergey.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for sharing the results with us. My question goes additionally to what was just discussed before. Based on the MDF increased consumption, is it fair to assume that even if MDF production is stagnating or just increasing little, that there would be much more MDF waste on the market or available? Because we are going to discard, like you said, the packaging material, the doors need to be replaced, the kitchen furniture or any kind of furniture is going to be replaced. And with that, because more and more MDF is used, then more MDF is going to be discarded. So that means that the potential, like you've mentioned, like it was mentioned before, is even bigger, and the sense to, let's say, separation or using some separation technique and new defibration techniques are more and more important.
Yeah, well, as you were talking, I set up the scenario for Europe with a conservative forecast, so fairly stagnant production. So that really is conservative. I don't know what the numbers are for 2024. Maybe George knows, but I couldn't go to the EPF meeting. But they're likely to increase in the future. But anyway, even if not, we've got this. Your question was, if it stagnates, it remains the same. If you look down in the blue graph at the bottom, you can see it's still gradually going up and up and up. Because you've got the accumulation of all those past years gradually becoming waste. So what you say is true. That will happen. And if we have a bit more growth, I don't know, maybe we should have 5 different things. But anyway, we've got optimistic. You can see it continues to go up and up.
Yeah.
And so this is what I was trying to say to George earlier. This is the kind of thing that depends whether you're a buyer or whether you're a policy maker. This can be either good news or bad news. And that's how I imagine this model being used. And also as a kind of justification for the existence of EcoReFibre itself, the project, to see, do we have a genuine problem or not, or genuine challenge to deal with this waste or not? And I think it's very real. It's there.
Yeah, I think as well. It's realistic. It's there, and it's a big challenge. What to do and how to implement that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey. So, Florence, I think our audience are have asked their questions. Is there any in the chat? I didn't look.
No, no questions in the chat for now. Are there any other questions?
You can also any wish list as well, because Latino and I, we still have a little bit of time to do to this. So, as I said, we hope to add a couple of more countries, but maybe there's other things you want to have. For example, I did think of one thing. I haven't told Latino this yet, but at the moment we've got additional consumption via imports of products. But could there be a situation where there's a country where it exports more than it imports? So should we have some negative numbers?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't think there are any more questions. So please feel free.
Can I make a point here? Because there is MDF waste that's coming into the various countries as imported furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And not produced in the country of the model, right? And that's also quite difficult to predict how much of that of the imported furniture, how much of that imported furniture, how much MDF contains. You know, that's quite hard.
Well, we couldn't do it in the end. We did try our best for France. We had good access to the customs data. And we had there's plenty of data that we used to try to predict the typical proportion of fiberboard, but in the end we decided it wasn't reliable enough. It's too easy to
okay.
Assumptions
but my point is, be careful, because a big percentage of demand for furniture is satisfied nowadays in Western Europe by imported furniture coming from other regions within Europe, but also outside Europe. So we probably then in that case the model underestimates, because there's more MDF that's coming in as imported furniture.
But they can add it here.
Yeah.
So this is additional consumption via imported products.
Right.
So it's based on the percentage of the actual production.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's good. Yes. Okay.
So and then you could have a country where a relatively small country where maybe half the MDF coming in, it actually comes from imports.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you select 100% here.
Yeah.
So that is there. But this is where the guide, I think, would be useful to help people create the different scenarios that they want and need for their own analysis. Okay. Well, I thank everybody for participating. Feel free to contact us if you have something that you would like to add, or particularly if you find a mistake, an error. We will be happy to hear from you, so that we can. We have a. Sorry. There's a question. Thank you very much, and well, don't forget to keep in touch with the EcoReFibre project. We have new material on our website on a regular basis, thanks to Florence and her team. So Stergios, do you want to?
Thanks a lot, Mark. Very good.
All right, my
Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone.
Okay, everyone, have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mark, Stergios. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.